We are welcoming Professor Leonard Ortolano, who has accepted to, he has even proposed to come to Aix-en-Provence to share with us for a 2-day course on corporate environmental management with the MBAs tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. And he accepted very gently to provide 2 hours of his time for a conference, a special conference, on a subject that he really knows well, that personally I know less well, and I think it's key in our understanding on globalization and general management. It's what about the Chinese situation when it comes to the environmental regulations and its competitiveness? Leonard Ortolano is a professor from Stanford University, belonging to the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. And if he wants to say something else, he'll do. I think for us it's enough, so you can imagine how happy we are to welcome him. Leonard is in sabbatical now in Rennes. You might ask why in Rennes when he could be in Aix, and that's a question I will ask him later. And I would like to thank him so much in advance, okay, and the floor is yours.
Okay. Well, Carolina asked me to make sure that we made this very interactive. So the first thing I would say is I would like to depart from a kind of formal one PowerPoint slide after the other and really entertain your questions as we move forward, rather than waiting for a question period at the end. There is nothing that you will do to throw me off, because I've been doing this for a long time, so just feel free to interrupt anytime. Now, I wanted to pose a question to you which partly explains how it is that an engineer proposes to a business school to teach a course on corporate environmental management, which is kind of unusual in my experience. So I'll give you a little bit of background, and then I'll pose the question, which I don't expect you to answer now, but we'll come back to it, because the question relates to Pakistan. It doesn't relate to China. I was working as a consultant for the World Bank on economic development in Pakistan. And one of the themes was that maybe we should understand what the Pakistani companies were doing in terms of environment, because it may provide a niche for them to corner share of market by being more environmentally sensitive. This was the opening premise. So I won't say too much about that study, but what I will say is that as the study was moving forward, we did a survey of about 80 Pakistani firms. The survey consisted of interviews that lasted between 1 and 3 hours. They were done by a local consultant, not by me. My wife, it turns out, would not allow me to go to Pakistan because people were blowing each other up, and they're not very fond of Americans. So I accepted that as a theme. The work was done by somebody else. So here's the interesting part. Of the 80 firms, about 2/3 of the firms did not know that there were environmental standards in Pakistan. Probably half of the firms had never seen or heard of the Pakistani Environmental Protection Agency. It turns out that maybe 1/3 of the firms were certified to ISO 14001, which is the international standard for environmental management systems. And that means that many of them were either meeting the standards or had a plan to meet the standards. So here we had a situation where the environmental regulatory establishment in Pakistan was accomplishing virtually nothing. I mean, most of the firms had never seen the people, most of them never heard of them, and certainly most of the firms, the 2/3 of the firms, didn't even know they had standards. They could not tell you, of course, whether they met the standards because they didn't even know they had them. But many of the firms were ISO certified, and not only that, but many of them were engaged in cleaner production, that is to say, modifying their operations to improve energy efficiency and so on. And so my question for you is, how or why were the firms motivated to do that? And the answer will be revealed when we look at China. And it turns out that for many reasons, China is a better subject than Pakistan, because with Pakistan, first of all, the work that I was doing has not been cleared by all the governments, one. And two, there is almost no literature on environment in Pakistan. Whereas for China, there is an enormous literature on environmental management. And so it's possible to say more interesting things. Is the question clear? Okay. Now, just as you know, the process goes forward, you know, just mull it over and maybe you'll come up with an answer. I'm sure you will, actually, because it's really quite evident from the situation in China.